Apology to everybody who's not on Zoom anymore, because the microphone on the lectern's been turned off for the whole service, so they've not heard anything. So they've gone their way. So I do apologise, and if they listen to it on video, because it is being recorded, they'll hear my apology. It's just one of those things. One of the complications of trying to effectively run two congregations at once, and it's a struggle that we're having. Our encounter this morning brings out conflict that existed, amongst the disciples. It's perhaps an odd thing to think about in sort of conflict on Mothering Sunday, but conflict was there no less about regarding the purpose of following Jesus. But who is it that has the most significant encounter with Jesus today in that passage? We tend to sort of know that passage. There are passages, and sort of looking at this series that we've done over the year, where we're looking at encounters with Jesus, they tend to be stories we know really well. And we sort of see what we already expect to see in it. But, yes, it is about Mary. But actually, other people encountered Jesus on this occasion as well. It could be Martha. There's Martha. She's in the story. She's there. Or it could be Lazarus. I'll tell you what, I might not have died back in July 2021, but I was certainly saved by God for a purpose on that day. How must Lazarus have felt? His friend literally brought him back from death, and he's there reclining at the table with Jesus, his life-giving friend. What an encounter that must have been. Or was it Judas, identified by John in this passage not as a shrewd treasurer, but as a thief? Or was it the other disciples and guests at the meal? So many conflicting opinions are out there, so many people to try and understand, so many different actions and motivations. Our encounter with Jesus today is entitled Mary Anoints Jesus. But there is so much more to see about encountering Jesus than just the actual anointing. I wonder, how well do you know your old Christian literature? A question for you. What is the chief end of men? Anybody want to tell us? Jason?
To glorify God and enjoy Him forever.
Man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him forever. The Westminster Shorter Catechism, I didn't know there's a Westminster Full or Longer Catechism as well, I think, that sort of expands that just a little bit. There's also the Heidelberg Catechism. Maybe you know that one better. This teaches that the chief end of man is to know, love and glorify God by living in accordance with his will, ultimately aiming for eternal happiness and praise to him. They agree, don't they, those catechisms? The chief purpose of man is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. And they do that by living, and we do that by living in accordance with his will. It's interesting, if you want to, I'd suggest you just go and Google about the Westminster Shorter Catechism, see how it came about. It's actually quite an interesting thing to look into. But I wonder how each of the participants in today's encounter line up against this measure. What is it that appears to be their main purpose in this narrative? But before we do that, first, a quick review of chapter 11 of John's Gospel. And I want to suggest perhaps some of the most staggering encounters ever. You see, Lazarus of Bethany becomes ill. His sisters Mary and Martha send for Jesus. Jesus delays. What was that about? Saying the sickness will reveal God's glory. By the time he arrives, Lazarus has been dead 4 days. Martha expresses faith that Jesus could have prevented the death, yet believes in the resurrection. Jesus declares, "I am the resurrection and the life." Deeply moved, he weeps at the tomb, then commands the stone be removed and calls Lazarus out alive. Many come to believe in him, but the miracle also prompts religious leaders to plot Jesus' death soon after this. And chapter 11 finishes like this: "Therefore Jesus no longer moved about publicly among the people of Judea. Instead, he withdrew to a region near the wilderness, to a village called Ephraim, where he stayed with his disciples. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, they kept looking for Jesus. But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone who found out where Jesus was should report it so they might arrest him." It's chapter 11, it's quite a massive chapter, isn't it? I mean, you might remember that Ephraim was a son of Joseph, one of the two half-tribes of Israel. He was therefore effectively adopted by Jacob when he went down into Egypt and found Joseph and his family. But what this village or small town that Jesus goes to? From what I can work out, there's no clear idea actually of where the location of Ephraim is. And although there clearly was a physical space that Jesus and his disciples retreated to, retreating is not an uncommon thing for us to do. They might have gone to this place called Ephraim, but we can have our own internal Ephraims. We work hard, we do good, we bring about change, and we disappear off inside ourselves. Well, it's not a bad thing to rest and reflect and regroup, as long as we don't stay in Ephraim too long. We're now back in chapter 12. It's 6 days before the Passover. We find a very ordinary happening, really. Jesus, and we can understand from verse 4 that his disciples who were with him return to Bethany. And just so that we get the link, John reminds us of what took place in Bethany and who Jesus' particular friends are in this little village down the other side of the Mount of Olives. John goes on then to describe how in this very ordinary scene a meal is given to honour a friend, not just any friend, but the friend who gave life to the man of the house, who gave life to Lazarus. The friend who, as we read just now, described himself in this way: "I am the resurrection," he said, "and the life." But this is still just really an ordinary scene. A table is set. Jesus, the honoured friend, is reclining. The disciples and other followers, including Lazarus, reclining with him at the table. I wonder what the conversation was. Was Lazarus being asked to testify by his neighbours to the extent of his restoration? Do they want to know what it was like to be raised from the dead? Was there hushed talk of the poorly managed common purse? Because they knew. Was there recounting of previous meals together? Did one or two of them keep an eye on the door in case their location had been shared and soldiers from the temple might descend upon them? Was there discussion regarding the proposed journey over the Mount of Olives and up to Jerusalem? What was it like? Sat listening to Jesus. What did he share? Did he remind them of previous things he had said? Were there new words he had to say? Were they just sat there in awe? This might have been an everyday table and everyday conversation, but it's an everyday encounter with the Son of God. I wonder, what are your everyday encounters with Jesus like? Yesterday, I was driving down to church for the men's breakfast. It was stupid o'clock. Let's just admit, I opened up at 6:45 a.m. For a change. Gemma hadn't seen our car arrive. I assume she was still asleep at that time. But you know, I was here. I've developed this sort of weird prayer thing that I've got going on. When I see certain places, maybe a store or particular location, I pray for particular people. So like when I go past a Tesco, I pray for a couple of young women who are going through really hard time at the moment. It's as if puberty wasn't hard enough for them. It's even worse. Why Tesco? Well, there's a massive Tesco near where one of them lives. So I associate Tesco with these two girls, even though they don't live near each other and don't even know each other. Well, now I associate Wickes and B&Q with the only friend I have from my youth that I'm still in any contact with. I found out on Tuesday that he has a very serious cancer diagnosis, and he's a carpenter by trade. So Wickes and B&Q seem a good idea to be markers to pray for him. And as I drove down yesterday, I looked over my left sort of shoulder as I left the Oldham Town Centre ring road, and Wickes was totally shrouded in mist. It is less than 100 metres away, and I couldn't see it. As I'd approached, as I'd come round the roundabout, I was praying specifically for my friend Julian's wife, Tracy, that she may know where the hills are that her help will come from, based on Psalm 121 verses 1 and 2. That they've moved to a new town a few years ago, and they've not found a church family since moving there. And as I'm praying that the mist might roll away from her eyes, that she might see clearly. And suddenly, I'm less than 200 metres down the road, and I'm driving in daylight. What I was praying for in the spiritual realms for Tracy seemed to be confirmed by Jesus in my physical world. This was my reality, if you like, my everyday, my making my way to church, to work, and encountering Jesus. And I'm encouraged. I'm actually really excited at what God may do in Julian. I spent the rest of the journey thanking God for all that he is and all that he can do. Do we look for the eternal in the everyday? Does our worship rise up from our normal experiences? Or do we force ourselves into a particular frame of mind on a Sunday morning? Martha is serving at table. Oh, what a surprise. Where else but serving would you expect to find her? Mary. Where's Mary? I mean, the beginning of our passage gives no clues, does it? Other than she's not there, it seems, in the first couple of verses. This is such an ordinary event. Martha hard at work, Mary apparently swinging the lead, Lazarus reclining with his friend and saviour, Jesus talking, engaging with these people, when all of a sudden Mary erupts onto the scene. No, not this Mary over here. Although, given what most of us know about this Mary, fairly good example. Do you know, the median full-time salary in 2025 in the United Kingdom was, wait for it, approximately £39,039 last year. That was the median, the average full-time salary. A little bit of maths for you. There are three types of averages. There's the median, this one that is being talked about here, which is the middle. You line everyone's income up and it's the middle one. You put them in order and it's the middle one. I think that's the best average to use, as it's weighted towards the millions and millions of middle and low earners and less towards the few thousands of excessively high earners. The other two averages, well, the mean would excessively be influenced by the high earners, and the mode would probably miss the middle earners because of so many people being paid at the living wage level. So to give you an idea, that's around the cost of a top of the range Skoda Enyaq, so no Skoda jokes please, or twice the average cost of a wedding with 100 guests in Manchester last year. Or it's the cost of the perfume that Mary poured out on Jesus' feet. I wonder what your personal treat is. Mine was this. If I can find it, which pocket? The phone I recently upgraded to. I've had a bottom of the range iPhone for years and years. Repeated upgrades kept at the bottom of the pile. But I came to realise that the camera on Mary's phone was now significantly better than mine. So when it came to upgrading last time, I treated myself to a phone with a really decent camera. I wonder what your treat is. One of the things on my phone is the Costa app. They promised me a treat on Saturday. They know it's my birthday. So I get a treat. Or is it? Undoubtedly, it'll involve hundreds of calories. You know, there are extravagances, aren't there, that we give ourselves, and sometimes maybe we even share those with others. The pure nard that Mary brought was incredibly costly. It would have come to Jerusalem along the Silk Road from areas we now know as India and Afghanistan. Not only is this the only place where the plant that it comes from grows, but the process by which the oil is extracted is really time consuming. It all adds to the cost. It is an oil that was traditionally used to anoint the body of the dead. And I think most likely it was something that those with any sense of means in those days would have saved to purchase during their lifetime. One of the things you could tick off as having got ready, you know, for your family when the day came. And Mary comes to Jesus and kneels at his feet and pours, well, this is how much she poured. Took a lot of cleaning up on Friday after Anne had her feet washed 10 times. This is how much the Bible says was poured on Jesus' feet. Obviously, in the original language, it doesn't use the word pint, but the translation comes out to being approximately a pint of this heavily aromatic oil. It's extra virgin oil, olive oil. Doesn't really smell of very much. I was hoping it might be really smelly and sort of filling this place. It was poured over his feet. Even the quantity that Mary used is extravagant. Imagine if you can, that being poured over your feet. It's going to go everywhere, isn't it? between your toes, on the floor, under the chair. We had the coffee get tipped over earlier. Under the chair. One of the things they teach you, on a first aid course is that a little blood goes a long way. Well, an aromatic oil will go even further, I suggest. And kneeling at his feet, she uses her hair. Obviously, she'd got long hair, not short hair like mine, to wipe the oil into his feet, making sure that as much of the oil anoints as much as his skin as possible. And then there's the aroma, the smell. John tells us that the whole house was filled with the smell. And if the house was filled, it would have been wafting through the village. Everyone would have known. Mary is knelt before her Lord and Master. She's poured out this fragrance on his feet, on the dirtiest and harshest part of his body. And then she's used her hair to wipe the oil into his skin. This woman is bowed in worship. She's given her most precious possession. No encounter that we come across, initiated by a person, gets more intimate than this. Mary has so much to be grateful for. I mean, after all, Jesus gave her brother life. Her love for Jesus is extravagant. It's without measure. The aroma of her worship fills the house and beyond. I wonder, does our worship reflect how full of gratitude our hearts are towards all that Jesus has done for us? Or do I hold back? Do I refuse to give all I have to the one who gave all for me? Nothing I give him can ever be wasted or even enough. We read 8 verses and I've only touched on 3 of them, but I think that's enough. On a day when we celebrate mothers, when our love for our mothers is perhaps highest in our minds, we've thought about a woman who demonstrated her love for Jesus, a love that was not excessive. I mean, how can our love for Jesus be excessive? But it was extravagant. It was challenging to those who were present. It sent up an aroma that filled the house and quite possibly the whole village. It was unmistakable, unavoidable. It was intimate. It was in the everyday life of that household. Jesus then goes on to defend Mary. In so doing, he points out once again his coming death. This Passover festival that has special significance. In her exaggerated worship, Mary seems to have prophetically got something the men missed. Here is worship and devotion in the ordinariness of life. So let's stop. We asked Drop In a question on Wednesday. The question was this: what are the 3 most important people or things in your life? I wonder, in the silence, go on, be honest with yourself. What's your answer? I don't think Mary of Bethany would have had any difficulty naming the top of her list. What is the chief end of Dave Butt? Dave Butt's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. What about you? Rather than pray before we sing, I want to read, I don't know whether it's a poem or a reading or whatever, came across this morning. As we come to close our worship this morning, let's just think about how we worship within the ordinariness of everyday life. We're living in an hour where darkness is bold. You don't have to go searching for it. Just turn on a screen and it is there. Sin is celebrated, conscience dulled, hearts desensitized. It could feel like the days of Noah all over again. But here is what I want you to hear this morning. Even while darkness increases, Jesus is not wringing his hands in heaven. He is busy preparing his bride. Not a religious bride, but a bride caught up in activity. Not a bride satisfied with church as usual, but a bride with adoring eyes, a bride who must have him. He is the Messiah. He is King. He is altogether lovely. He is the sweet master, and he is walking toward the door of his church, not merely for occasional visitations, but for habitation. He wants to come in and rest. He wants to make himself at home. He wants the kind of welcome where his presence is not just felt, but hosted, where strangers can walk in from outside and sense Jesus is resting here. He wants to come in and rest. He wants to make himself at home. He wants the kind of welcome where his presence is not just felt, but hosted. Apologies, I'm reading the same bit again. Where they can have a head-on collision with the Most High God, where hearts are changed not by hype, but by holiness. And the doorway that opens that kind of atmosphere is not a clever program, but it is hunger for him. We're going to sing as we finish an old song, but I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about Jesus.